Hi and good afternoon and welcome back to Dog Speak Live. Today we have the wonderful Jon Davison of Canine Assist, and John's going to be talking to us today about the emotional experience of dogs. John is the founder of Canine Assist Dog Training and Behaviour. John is married to Fiona. They have two lovely dogs. One's called Bliss, a 5-year-old Springer Spaniel, and Marvin, a 9-year-old Cockapoo. This is the major part of Canine Assist, helping so many dogs through their reactivity. John has worked with dogs for over 35 years in rescue, fostering, boarders, dog boarder, daycare, and as a trainer, and has been solely been a dog trainer for the last 15 years. John specialises in scent work and overseas rescues, but mostly nervous and fearful dogs in general. He is a pet dog trainer, providing solutions for owners to have their best family member they can. And the emotional experience of the dog is at the core of what he does. Relationship building, trust, confidence in the handler from the base of our from the form the basis of fundamentals. Not sit, not stay, not come here. Our learning never stops. And John, you're so right. Learning doesn't stop.
No.
Every time I learn something new, I realise I didn't know enough. Yeah. And the more I'm around other trainers, even people just coming into the industry, I think, well, how comes I didn't know that?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the new ones, you come in and you just go, oh, that's pretty neat.
It is, but that's why I love the industry. Yes, the industry has its problems, but I love the industry because there are so much to learn, so much more information we can gather and take in and help clients with and dogs. But we're never going to learn it all, but we
Nope.
should learn enough. Yeah, there's enough to learn. So, John, what is the emotional experience of a dog?
Oh, I mean, I love this topic, but it is such a vast one, and we could delve into it in so many ways. So we could delve into it from a endocrinology chronological system basis. Can't even say it, let alone spell it. But we could look at it from a physiological standpoint and what have you. But I think for me, it's like looking how the dog feels and looking at that observable behavior that we can see, and we can make sure that the dog is comfortable as best as we can. We know that everything we do, even in training, has an impact upon the dog. So just doing straightforward training is adding some pressure to the dog and is adding some sort of understanding on a certain level. And some dogs thrive with that, and then some dogs, you see shy away. So really, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the emotional experience of a dog, probably in the name of training. So I mean, we can talk about it in terms of ownership. We can talk about it as that dog lives with us day to day and how we live our lives as humans. And how does the dog fit into that? Which is when I say I'm a pet dog trainer, that's probably the core that I come at. Hoping that's making sense in terms
Yes.
that, I look at a family unit and yes, I'll get calls from people, and it will be your stereotypical, well, I have a problem loose lead walking, or I have this problem with jumping up, or I have that problem. And all those are just kind of, the often the symptom of something. So there's something going on for the dog that's driving that behavior, be it excitement, fear, frustration, all those other emotions that are going on. So if I can kind of understand that and help the family understand that, and then we can get to this harmonious living that fulfills everybody, I find that, well, it's definitely more rewarding for me as a trainer. And I also think from the feedback that I get from my clients, and obviously I look at obviously the reviews that I get and the comments that come back and the support that we offer and the messages that come in, that my clients that I'm working with at the moment really love that type of approach, because some of my clients aren't really interested in doing, they just want the dog to exist. They need it to be a good dog, right? They need it to follow the laws of the land that pertain to us as human owners. But they're not they don't want a prescriptive dog. They don't want this. They don't need that. So, that's kind of hoping I've rounded that off quite well, because
That,
the
that,
topic
that,
is
that,
massive.
that, no, that makes perfect sense. So, in other words, that dogs do have emotions, and depending on what is triggering a specific type of emotion, we need to find out why, and then move and work from there. So, would you say that the dogs that you're working with, we have an understanding that you work with a lot of dogs that are reactive, fearful, and nervous. So their emotional experiences are going to be 10 times worse than the dog that's happy, if that makes sense. So do you want to sort of like touch on that?
Yeah, so if we look at, say, I mean, if I just pick some, maybe talk through like a couple of sort of mini case studies, if you like, and
Hmm.
probably gives it a more real feel. Um, I can go to a client's house, and obviously they'll have said to me, yes, my dog's aggressive to humans, and every time a human walks past, my dog is doing this, and it's guarding me or it's protecting me and it's doing all of this. And I'm like, well, okay, tell me what's happening. And I get them to describe the behavior. So, and often for us as trainers, we're going to lump that into reactivity as a big global thing, and then we're going to narrow that down to find out the why. Okay, so what's happening? What's the context? What's the precursor? What's the picture looking like when the dog's doing that? So I will walk in, and or I'll have the initial conversation, and I'll have all that as the labels, but I'll have delved in. I'll say, okay, tell me when this is showing itself. Tell me what the dog is showing. Is it barking, lunging? Is it hiding behind your leg? Is it doing all of these things? But if it's experiencing big emotions, obviously the one that we obviously know about is
Yeah.
the barking and the lunging, and it's like it looks horrific, and you show, if you manage to get a video of it, it looks like this dog just wants you to rip you from limb. But we know that if we were to just unclip the lead or let go of the dog, it would more than not just run away from you,
Yeah.
because the majority of sort of reactivity often comes from that place of not being sure about what's going off. And if they can choose flight, they will often choose flight. You know, Whole different debate about forward aggressing dogs, but generally we can assess that. So I'll go, okay, well, is the dog protecting you? Well, if I walk towards you and the dog runs off, well, the dog's not protecting you. You
Okay.
think it's protecting you, but
Yeah.
actually the dog isn't. So we work through all of these little things, and we go, the dog is feeling really stressed right now. It's seen me, it's getting worried. So, and this is hard then for a trainer, because they've been called. And the reason I want to talk about the emotional experience of the dog is because as trainers, we feel very pressured to solve the problem, to get in there immediately and solve this reactivity. And the owners who are paying us, decent money, hopefully, but they're paying us money to solve that problem. But actually, we may be being employed by the client, but we're actually almost being employed on the dog's behalf, because
Yes.
we're there to bridge that gap between what the dog's feeling and trying to get that communication back to the human, so that both get what they want and what they need. And that's often a problem I see in dog training, that we always focus on the human end in terms of we must solve this for the human because they're the one that's paying the bill. The dog isn't. So we look at that situation, and then the next step for me is, right, okay, the dog is getting concerned by me. Okay, so how do I get that dog relief? And this is the hard part again as a trainer. The
Yeah.
dog's worried about you. How do you help that dog? Because if you start walking towards the dog's getting more and more stressed. So it's like, is the pressure that I'm applying by going closer too much for that dog? And for some dogs, it will be too much. And for some dogs, it'll be okay. And it's understanding these little nuances of going, I need to try and get a way in. And it's like, it's like, okay, what's the dog's favorite thing? What's the dog's favorite toy? Is there a way that I can manipulate the toy? Is there a way I can start showing the dog something different? Does the dog need me to do something? So the owner might say, well, if you just come in and you sit down on the sofa and you leave the dog alone for the next few minutes, it'll gradually just wander over in its own mind. And if you just kind of, it'll then start to settle. And it's okay, well, maybe we can try that. If the dog loves a ball, and it really, really loves, and I mean, really loves a ball or really loves a toy, then I'm going to introduce that, because then I hopefully can do value transfer, getting some of that value from that toy and go, okay, this guy's not so bad. And then we can work from there. And again, allowing the dog that freedom, that kind of sort of almost a little bit like free shape in a little way, but it's this fine balance of pushing a little,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
knowing when to. I suppose you call it like pressure on, pressure off. It's like knowing when to apply a little bit
yeah,
and then sort of let the dog work through this. Um, and then when the dog gets comfortable, it's right, okay, so now the dog's starting to comfort, and then we can then look at the training program. Then we can decide what are we going to do. And then we can identify that this dog on site struggles. So we know that it's that initial sight element that becomes problematic. So that's the bit that we need to work on. And often if you only work on that sight bit, the actual other stuff sometimes disappears quite quickly. Not always, but
uh-huh,
often disappears quickly. So it's like there's almost these links and these chains all the way along the line, but it might only be one part that is not working properly. But because we know that dogs don't, they dysregulate and they
uh-huh.
can't rationalize through it, that one part that is is the bit that we need to work on solves all the rest.
Yeah,
And so then it's like, and people often get quite amazed then if you do that, where they go, oh God, I can't believe it that all of a sudden, yeah, we're doing this with a site, whether that is we're letting the dog exist in neutrality and just be peaceful and just sort of observe the world going by at a safe distance and just we don't need to offer a reward, we don't need to be giving the dog food, we don't need to even be playing with the dog, we can just kind of go and let the dog exist but with safe distance, and then we can work on that distance without needing to offer it anything, and it just naturally, because the feeling of getting back to that homeostasis point is actually really reinforcing for the dog in of itself.
yeah,
So we don't need to give them something to pet. And I think this is that common misconception of if you're a kind or reward based trainer or whatever you want to call it, that you're only ever offering a piece of food. Well, we're not. We're offering them the chance to feel better. And
yeah,
that feel better could be emotionally. It could be with a piece of food, because some dogs, rest his soul, Rebel was an absolute food beast, right? I mean, to be honest, he was one of the easiest dogs to train because he would do anything for the world. I mean, I'm not being funny. I'm not going to get into a debate about foods, but I could pick up a piece of Baker's and hold it there, and he'd be like, "What do you want me to do for this piece of food?" Right? I will do anything for that piece of food because he was so food driven.
yeah,
Bliss, on the other hand, she likes food, but she's very toy driven. She's very affectionate driven, and she
mhm,
likes certain things. So I tried with her to make her susceptible to reinforcement. So all these little things and these little nuances of the dog, but often we go straight into that solution mode. We go straight into, right, this dog is feeling scared. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. We're going to take the dog out. We're going to do this. We're going to put it almost in front of its triggers. And we're just going to work through this. And we're going to do this. And we're going to offer it a piece of food. And then we're going to try this. And then eventually the dog kind of almost has enough. So and it looks like the dog's chilled. But as you and I know, we talk about shut down dogs, and we can see, most of us can see these subtle behaviors. The walk is a bit more stoic. It's not
yeah,
as fluid. It's not as flowing. It doesn't mean the tail's tucked. The tail can just be nice and down, but it's not it's got no flow to it. It's kind of held in that kind of stiff position. So we're reading all this and going, but that dog's not comfortable. So the internal experience belies what's showing outward for the owner, because the owner's going, oh, this is great. Yeah, the dog's walking lovely. It's ignoring everything, but there's still that internal turmoil. And without getting too medical, because obviously that's not for me to sort of, what we know. And when I talk to all my colleagues and vets and things like that, we know that there are levels and there are things that can happen internally from having too much stress flowing through the system on a continual basis. So if we don't think about that emotional experience and make sure that the dog is giving us all those normal expressive body language situations, we can be causing harm that we might not even know about for years,
yeah,
right? And that for me is the bigger risk. It's not about the now, it's about the longevity as well. So I talk about longevity of result. I email most of my clients every year to go, right, you worked with me a while ago. Is the behavior still there? Are we still maintaining that behavior? So is the dog still happy? Is the dog still so yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell. But with the reactivity, it's then going, right, okay, now we've got you into this nice place. we can start rebuilding those triggers back in a gentle way, so that actually now doesn't mean that I need to have loads and loads of visits with the client. And I think the important thing for me is that when I talk to any trainers or new trainers coming in, it's what's your support mechanism for your client? It's not about having 6 visits, but it might be that you need to have the element for them to have support in the background, so
Yeah.
that you can move the criteria on and keep them moving and keep them progressing, and having these milestone markers so that they can see the improvement. Because often it's really difficult because the improvements can be
Yeah.
small. We will see them more. So that becomes important as part of a process. But yeah, so I hope I've kind of gone through that one, but there's a few other things. But yeah, reactivity is
No,
a good one.
that's really good, interesting, and I learned something from that as well. And I've been doing it for 20 odd years. So we always got something to learn, something that you're probably doing, but you're not realizing you're doing it. And so, in a nutshell, I suppose what we're saying is that training isn't the first go-to thing.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not, Colin. Absolutely not. I think, yes, we get called to do this, but I suppose the kind of way that we're almost like a GP in a way. We kind of we're a cover-all for so many things. And most GPs will try and have a look at something, and they kind of will identify and they'll work through some stuff. And I certainly don't want to get into data about the state of GPs and getting in contact. But the point is that's how it works, right? They will try, and then from that, there's then offshoots, obviously, to more specialists. So as they identify the problem, there'll be some problems that they are more than capable of working on. There'll be some problems that they can refer to a GP who's in the same practice of them, but has a more speciality field in that area. And then others, it might mean that they absolutely need to go off to a specialist. So the key for me with assessing a dog is going, well, okay, let's say we're talking sort of separation anxiety, how mild, how severe, what's the triggers, what causes that? Does that need to go to a more specialist trainer who absolutely deals with high level separation anxiety on a daily basis? Do they need to be working with that? Or because I do deal with separation anxiety, I understand it, but it's not something that I necessarily deal with day in, day out.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, to be fair, I might say to you, it's not necessarily my favorite thing to work on. But I'm lucky that I have a really good friend who is a absolute pro in separation anxiety, that I will refer most of my separation cases to, because they are brilliant at it. They have such a depth of knowledge that is way outstrips mine. So I will refer that on. So I think that's a good point to start at and go, I need to identify, like you say, the first point is if I walk into a visit, even though I've had an initial call and I've got some facts, that initial visit, I'm going to spend the first bit of time observing the dog. I'm going to be seeing how it interacts with the family members, but also how my sudden sort of intervention into the household changes that dog's demeanor. So are the owners saying things like, the dog never does this normally? You know, the dog, if it was someone the dog knew, this is what the dog would do in. But now that it's an unfamiliar, the dog's doing this. So again, I can read that and go, well, we've now introduced some stress, albeit that nothing bad's happening to the dog. It has created a change in behavior. And if I go straight into then trying to train, the dog's already in a little bit of a stressful situation, albeit mild stress, right? And again, mild stress is not a horrendous thing. And obviously dogs do need to be exposed to stressors, but we know that because of their emotional system, because of that sort of amygdalic process for dogs, that they have these big emotions, we need to control it so that they don't go, you know, 0 100. We try and get them there. But if I start trying to train immediately and the dog's comfortable, the dog's going to be very resistant, or the dog's going to be, oh my God, something really. And I make the training session unpleasant in the name of trying to just show the owners what they need to do. The hard part is, and when you become really, really proficient and confident as a trainer, you are much more likely to be able to go to them and say, right, here's what I want to do. This is what we're going to try and do today. This is what I want to look at. But the dog's going to drive this behavior. And I will be talking you all the way through it to say, well, actually, we can't really train at this stage. What I might do is I might take a step back and see if the dog will work with you. and if I take a step back and I'll try and coach you from a distance.
Yeah.
But that's tough in itself, because the way that I like to train is I do like to tell the owners what we're going to do. And if I can, I like to show them
Yeah.
and then get them to do it, because I think it's that I like that style of learning. I think it helps owners know it, see it, and then do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm trying to coach them from afar, they will be getting their timing wrong. And of course, if I'm going, oh, you need to stop, and I've created a bit of distance away from the dog, and I'm having to go, no, 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 that's wrong. Then of course the dog's going, oh God, what's going off? And again, or even that communication can add some pressure to the dog. And it's very subtle. And some might go, well, you're sparing the dogs too much. They've got to experience this. But we're trying to create a learning experience for the dog, not for them to kind of see this as, a negative thing. And I think we do go in too quickly. And I was guilty of it myself when I first started. It was like my whole key driver was, the owner's got this problem. I need to go in. I need to do this. I need to solve this. And
Yeah.
I need to do it as quickly as possible.
I totally agree with you. I went there too. Training was the first thing I went to. Um, Trying to get the problem solved early. But then you soon learn this is not the way we go about things. We need to take the dog terms, respect the dog as a sentient being,
Yeah.
respect the dog who has emotions, and respect the dog to do things at their own pace. So I totally with you on that. What can be hard for some trainers, especially new trainers, is the pressure they may feel that they're coming under, and you touched on it earlier on, where they feel they are working solely for the human client. Yeah. Whereas really and truly we're there for the welfare of the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so trying to combine the human side, the canine side, can put some pressure on some trainers, behaviorists, and make them do the wrong things. However, learning about the emotion, learning about the dog that's in front of us, I truly believe if we can get the client on board and work in the way you have just suggested, we're onto a winner. Yeah. Because it is about the emotional experience. It's about the dog being able to process that the world isn't as bad as I first thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving the dog distance, etc., etc. How do you actually get across to the client? This is not just a thing that we're going to come in and want to teach your dog to sit, stay, stand, go settle. Um, how do you get across to them that, hey, let's slow down here. Let's take it slowly.
And I think there is the magic question, because as I'm sure
Yeah.
that's the challenge. And now the even before that, so even if I go even before that particular problem, the key for me is picking the right client for you. So often, when I have my calls, my discovery calls, I'm like, we're doing that, what I call the blabber method, where we just have a conversation, we blabber, we talk. And again, you probably do it in consults, because it's, if you can get the owners just talking and just blabbing information, you hear little nuggets of really pearlers and stuff. So I do like that, but it's like at that very early stage, making sure that the client is bought into the method, bought into what we're trying to do. So I try and make sure they understand the way that we train, how we look at things, and make sure they're fully comfortable with that. And so, yeah, picking the right client for a start. I have made mistakes where I picked the wrong client, and I just knew from some of the words, and I was like, I just so wanted to help the dog, and it just was never going to work because the client was just not bought in. And it's then hard, and then you create a problem. But in terms of trying to get up, I suppose the way that I try and look at it is to go, well, okay, is there anything that I can get within that initial training phase that kind of looks pretty slick or looks pretty good, that kind of gives them that feeling of hope, that feeling that there is something. Now, let me just pick a sort of simple case. So let's just pick like loose lead walking as a simple premise. So I've got a client that's got a wonderful dog, but it's the most manic thing out on a walk that you have ever seen in your life. I mean, we've all got them. And it's like, okay, so what's the magic bullet with this? What is it? So the doorway is a massive problem for this dog, full stop. So again, on that initial assessment, when I'm working with the dog, she's ringing me saying the problem is loose lead walking. I turn up and the problem is not just loose lead walking. I walk through the door, the dog's manic at the door. The cleaner turns up at the door, the dog goes manic at the door. Tesco delivery turns up and then doorbell goes and then this happens. And the back door, there's a cat over the neighbor. And every doorway, this dog is just having an absolute. But the owner never really mentioned anything like that to me because to them, that wasn't the problem because that didn't really impact their lives so much. So it's like, well, okay, look, have you noticed this? And then it's like trying to say, well, look, I can get your dog to not chase that cat in the back garden, or we can go out slowly and we can do all this. We can get your cleaner into the house without the dog jumping all over them. And it's like, it may not be the thing that they actually want to solve, but it shows them what their dog is possible to do. And sometimes it's something like that to just try and get a little in to say, oh my God, yeah, my dog used to jump up this cleaner all the time, and now they've just sat here. We've slowed everything down. So again, that thing of slowing everything down, and they're okay. And then it's like, then I'll say, right, okay, now let's think about the antecedents of leaving. So the harness, the lead, all of those things, and all these little bits as we go. We're suddenly starting to see the dog's paying more attention, and then the owners are noticing that, oh, my dog's paying more attention to me. And then we get outside and it's like, gosh, my dog's normally dragging me through the great gate by this point, but now the dog's paying attention. I go, right, okay, but now we're at a point where there's so much stimulus potentially outside that don't expect the dog to remain this calm. So we've got some work to do. We've got to this point now
Mhm.
where the dog might be able to see one person walk past your gate and they might not react. And so if we see one person walk across the road and the dog just looks and doesn't do anything, and we did give it some food on that occasion, we just said, oh, well done, good job. And then we went back in. I said, but if we'd have waited for a second person to come or a third person, the chances are the dog would have kicked off. So they're like, no, but that's like amazing. And they feel good about that. So it's that little mini win that gives us an aim to kind of say, but this is the process now, and this is where we're going to go through. We don't need to go into conflict with the dog. We don't need to put the dog under too much pressure, and we can slowly try and go through then our standard, the normal desensitization, counter conditioning, habituation, exit. I suppose it wouldn't be, sorry, wouldn't be habituation because the dog's already sensitized to it, so it would have to be. But I suppose the word I wanted to use was existing in that environmental space
Okay.
without reacting. So apologies for even I make these mistakes where I go, oh yeah, we're just going to exist. But you get my point that
Okay.
we're going to just relax and chill out and exist here. And even if we don't walk anywhere at this stage, we're
Mhm.
just existing in this space and we're chill. And again, that whole point of we're in that state of homeostasis, we're in that kind of nice calm, just the world's going by and I'm not having this. And then we can gradually move out inch by inch by inch by inch by inch, widening the dog's world. So often, one of the things we often talk about is, people go, oh, but if you go to avoidance, so you avoid the triggers. And it's like, but avoidance isn't the whole program.
Yeah.
Avoidance is often just that very first part of the program to try and build some focus back onto the handler, some existing in these spaces calmly. So existing in the doorway, existing just outside the doorway, building some focus back on so that then when we start bringing those triggers back in and we start not avoiding anymore, the dog has learned some skills.
Yes.
you know so those skills come from that avoidance stage, and then we bring back the triggers slowly so the dog can learn in that. We all talk about the 3Ds: distance, duration, distraction, all those levels, the criteria shift. We raise it bit, which makes it easier for the dog to understand. The hard part is then communicating that process, going, well, okay, how long is a piece of string? For some dogs that could take one day. For another dog, it's a week. For another dog, it's a month, right? And there's no set pattern, but it doesn't mean that just because one is one day, one is 1 week, and one is 1 month, that means they're going to have one visit, they're going to have 10 visits, and they're going to have 20 visits. It could be you need to do 3 as a minimum to get you up to the end result, but it could be 3 visits for all of them, but they're spread out at different time frames. And then the use of the support, which for me, I think we need to be better at in terms of that. So rather than always aiming to do visits and trying to move it on, it's like, well, we only should be going in for maybe another visit sometimes when we've reached that plateau and we need to really step up to the next big criteria shift. Because I can change my client's criteria through a WhatsApp message. They can send me a video. I can then just give them something back. And obviously, so much support is included in what we offer that they don't then feel pressured in going, "Oh, God, we can't do this training. It's going to be too expensive. I'm going to have 10 visits to do this." It's like trying to make sure we build that right, but that's a whole different podcast. But it means that we're focused on the dog and we're not being driven by speed of result. We're not saying that I need to solve this in a week or I need to solve this in this. We're going, right, this dog is really struggling with this. So we've got to get this little portion right first. And that might take us however long. And then we've got to work on the next portion, and then we're going to work on the next portion. And once you know that, so again, loose lead walking, it's like, and once we've done that, I mean, I've just had a message from the lady today, actually, ironically. She goes, yeah, I've managed to get out of my gate. I've walked down to the corner. I've walked past the garage, which is where the guy who works at the garage always triggers my dog to bark, and he's not barked once. And she said, I was out for no more than 3 minutes and I've gone back in. It's the best walk I've had.
And that all comes back down to respecting how the dog felt from the first moment you saw them,
Yeah.
and then bringing everything backwards instead of going forwards too quickly, allowing the dog time to be able to process the environment,
Yeah.
process what's going on, and allowing them the time to actually tell us when they can move forward without feeling conflict or
Yes.
conflict, which is quite important. So if we
Yes.
rush in and we start, I call it forcing and I call it punishment, when we are then not allowing the dog that time to be able to think for themselves and feel, because I think
Yeah.
feeling is equally as important as us allowing the dog to be. When a dog can feel, I feel they're in a better learning space to make better decisions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the best things to see. I mean, I love watching a dog almost work through something. All right, just a slightly funny story about Marvin, our cockapoo, and Bliss. And this for me, this only happened, I think, when did it happen? A couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week. Um, they both have Bliss loves frisbee and the purple rings. You know the purple rings, the throwing
Oh
thing.
yeah.
We're redoing our garden at the moment because we're building a new doggy arena. We've moved what is we call it the doggy swimming pool, but it's a pond and it's for cooling off in the summer, so we fill it full of water and we've moved it down to the bottom. But we've built a rock around it, so it's got levels for the dogs to go up on. I'm throwing the purple ring, and the purple ring went into the pond. Now, Marvin goes to the edge of the pond, and then he's doing the sort of trying to pour in, and then he's whimpering and he's whining because the purple ring's in there, but he won't go in to get it. Okay. Now, I'm like, well, obviously, if I go down now and I go and get it out of there and throw it for him,
Yeah.
then he's going to do that behavior again and again because it
Yeah.
works, right? But sod's law that Bliss she's looking down and she can see Marvin by the side of the pond whimpering. So she runs down, jumps straight in, picks it out, and comes out. Now I'm thinking, well, maybe this is quite good because while we know that dogs aren't great at observational learning, but some dogs do it better than others. So I'm thinking maybe if he just watches Bliss jump in and out the pond a few times, he'll jump in. So I throw the purple ring down, it goes into the pond. Marvin goes to the edge, scratches at the stone, whimpers, looks at Bliss. Bliss runs down, gets the frisbee, comes back out. I'm thinking this. So I'm like, right. I'm getting to no, Marvin. You can't use Bliss to get your thing that you're finding difficult. Bliss is having the time of her life. She's just running down, jumping in, getting it, running out. Marvin's coming back with a smile on his face, going, "Look what I did." I'm like, not that he would do that. No, humanize, I'm anthropomorphizing heavily there. But and so I thought, no, right, Bliss, you're going inside. So I put Bliss inside, threw the purple ring down, goes in the pond. Marvin's there scratching at the stone, won't go in. What happens now? Please don't anyone repeat this to Fiona. Fiona comes in, sees Marvin struggling, walks straight down to the pond, goes in, picks it out, and then throws it for him. I'm like, I'm trying to get some confidence going for this poor lad. So anyway, this goes on for a bit, and then I'm throwing it in, and eventually he kind of manages to get his paw to touch the bottom, and then he goes in and he gets the purple ring out. Second time was a bit quicker. Then he had a little bit of a sort of step back where he was like, no, I'm not going back in. Now, in, out, in, out, in, out. Every time it goes in, just jumps in. Now, I could look at that and say, well, I put him under some pressure, right? Because the purple ring was in there, but I'm not involved. The purple ring had fell into this hole. It was there, and he's looking at it. Now I have to be careful, right? Because if he was going to get too stressed and too worked up, then I might have to intervene. But what I did have was the second purple ring with me at all times. So that if
Oh,
he was getting too stressed, and I thought, no, this has gone on for too long and he's working himself up into a frenzy, I can just say, no, come here, Marvin, I've got the second one, and I can throw that one
yeah,
and take him away from the first.
yeah,
But if I don't let him work through some of these things without me being present, nudging his bum to try and get him to go in, or on a lead, or even with a piece of food and trying to lure him in, for him to then just work through that, I'm considering the emotional experience of Marvin, right?
yes,
He's got a chance to get relief, so he can come away from there freely. I've got the second toy, which means he can come and still have the play that he wants to have without the pressure of the pond, and we've removed that. But then he can go back and have another look. And again, if you think about it, it's what we do when we do things like sort of noise work, like with cardboard
mhm,
boxes, we put items in, we put food in, and the dogs learn to make the noise themselves. So I'm going through this, but it was just a funny story because I just thought it's just ironic how dogs learn and process. And yet Bliss was like, oh, I'll help Marvin out. I'll go and do this. And Marvin's going, yeah, I don't need to go in. I just imagined it going off in his head like that. Um, but I think it's like pressure like that, which is natural. So I wasn't forcing anything on him. He wasn't
okay,
being pressured to go in. He could make a decision to go in or not go in. So he's free to make that choice. The thing I would have to consider in terms of emotional experience of that is the purple ring such a high driver for him that it
right,
would create too much frustration
yeah,
at that level? And that is a consideration that I was thinking about. Had he have suddenly got so frustrated and he was constantly scratching at the stone, then I would have to have gone and sort of
yes,
intervened. But what I would have done is, again, I would have used the second one, and probably like you, I always have two or three of every
yeah,
toy and what have you, just so that, because I don't necessarily want to go into the pond and retrieve it and throw it for him. I want him to just go, well, let's play with this one. And then when you're kind of not looking at me, I'll pick the other one out and we'll come away. So, but I have to consider his emotional experience. Now, I made the decision at that point that, yeah, Marvin was remaining quite happy. He wanted to go in and get it. He was pushing a little bit at a time. And again, a lot of like what would technically be like sort of free shaping for him.
yeah.
He could make the decision. It was all on him. There was nothing, I was not even involved in that situation apart from the fact that I threw the toy and it went in, but that's nothing effectively to do with me. So there's a kind of weird example, but I thought it was an interesting one in terms of you still have to consider how the dog feels about that.
It's interesting in the sense that mostly we talk about the human that will go in, and dogs start to learn that if I sit back, the human will come in and make it all good. In this particular situation, the dog went in to make it all good for the other dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other dog soon learned, so if you're going to get it, I can just scratch wine and watch you happily, blissfully, no pun intended, go get it. Yeah. Dogs are a unique specimen. We learn and we learn and we learn from them. But the emotional aspect of a dog is really, really important, and we mustn't forget that.
Yeah.
But yes, we all need some stress in our lives to be able to move forward.
Of course. I mean, it's stress at the right time, at the right
Yeah.
level. And stress is not, I mean, excessive chronic stress, we know it's detrimental to humans.
Yeah.
And obviously there's quite a lot of studies out there on stress in dogs, and it would seem that dogs have more of a negative impact on stress, whether that's because their lives are shorter, so you actually see as bodies degrade through age, we naturally might see it more in dogs sort of earlier and sooner, but it does suggest that it has more of an impact on a dog system than it does on humans, and it's bad enough in humans, right?
Yeah.
So, and it is interesting that we often focus on, like I say, the solution. I've just got one more case, if I'm okay, kind of, because
Yeah, of course. You
this,
carry on.
this one is a bit of an extreme case, and it's only one that's sort of come to me recently, but it really highlights where making a horrendous decision on the emotional experience, where you only focus on the human side, is
No.
so detrimental to a dog. And now, please, there is a little bit of a trigger warning with this. The outcome is we're looking pretty good at the moment. So we've done some work already, and we think that we can get this dog to a good place. But it is a bit of a sad story. But anyway, so I've got a lovely cockapoo called Nala, who has been rescued by another family. So it's now with another family, but is known to the existing family. Okay, so I think they're relatives at some degree. Nala suffered with separation anxiety, but only when the female owner of the initial house would leave.
Right.
And would whimper, cry, and would get really distressed, even if the male owner was in the house. So there was some secure attachment, obviously, to the female, but it just got super stressed. The male owner obviously got upset with this. I'm not saying he got necessarily upset because why is this dog getting stressed because the female's gone and doesn't get distressed when I leave. There might be some of that. It could just be that I'm trying to work from home and this dog's making so much noise and it's kind of being disruptive. It was weeing in the house and so sorry, at this point it wasn't weeing in the house. Sorry, jumped a little bit ahead of myself, but it was suffering from some separation related. And the advice that they got was to put it in a crate. So he stuck it in a crate based on the advice. Didn't make any difference. In actual fact, the dog just got more and more distressed and made more and more noise. And then the next step of advice was to use an e-collar on the dog. Now, don't want to get into the whole debate of that, but the point was that this was done to try and get the dog not to make noise and to be quiet. So now we move forward from that, and it's like now, every time the female owner left, the dog was now wetting itself and pooing itself. So what had happened now is we have now moved, and so this lady that I'm working with now rescued this dog and is doing a wonderful thing. But now every time she leaves the house, the dog wheezes and poos when she leaves the house. Now, the subtle difference here is we talk about emotional experience. This problem started originally as a separation anxiety case. But I'm sure your brain's already going now, Colin, going, this is no longer separation related. This is trauma related, where now the dog fears the female going because of such bad things. And even she cannot go to the toilet in a pub. She can't go to the bar and order. Even if she's kind of, it's like this lady walks away from her, there is just this traumatic response in this dog. But again, if I look at that from a nutshell and forget about just even if you just take the crate issue, and crates can be wonderful for dogs, right? Okay. But in this particular situation, if we just take that, we didn't consider the emotional experience of the dog. Nothing that was done in that scenario. The dog was suffering from separation anxiety. No one tried to solve or help the dog deal with the separation of the owner. What was advised and went straight to was, restraint, control, correction, punishment, intimidation, pain and discomfort straight away. So we completely ignored the dog because we were only bothered, or the person that gave the advice, and I mean, it's horrendous advice, right? I think we can all agree.
Definitely agree.
And so, but the emotional experience of the dog was completely ignored. Now, I would suggest that at some point, that method has probably worked for that particular trainer that gave that advice in terms that the behavior stopped. But I would argue that if you then think about the emotional experience of the dog, even a dog that has suddenly stopped giving those outward behavior signs would still be feeling the same way this dog feels. And if you were able to explain that to them, would we do that? Um, and most of us, so that's a pretty extreme case. So I've gone through sort of the funny case with Bliss. I've gone through a low level sort of loosely walking case. We've done a little bit on reactivity, and then we've gone to an extreme case. So you can see through all of those, the emotional experience is massively important because separation anxiety is a complex issue in of itself, but the solutions for helping a dog with separation anxiety aren't massively complex, and they're not massively difficult to do. They're timely, and there's a lot of effort that needs to go in. But we still went to, I must stop the dog from doing this outward display without thinking about what the internal experience of the dog is. And it just saddens me that we don't, and it may be a societal issue in terms that everything is a quick fix, everything is speedy. And we can hit a button today and have something delivered tonight, and we're into this speed society. Whereas dogs didn't get that memo. Dogs, evolutionary speaking, have remained as dogs pretty much.
It is very sad when we humans, it was man that felt the need to domesticate and train and do all these different things. Yet man cannot, and I say man, I'm talking about all men,
Yeah,
yeah, all man, women. We, some of us will take dogs and work with them and treat them the way they deserve to be treated. And then there are some of us that have no time to think, stop, and do the right thing. It's all about the financial side of it and the experience of watching the dog squirm. That's, yeah, that's for another debate, another topic, and another podcast. But it's been absolutely brilliant listening to you, John, because of your shared experiences and your wealth of knowledge. And anyone that's watching this, the first go to, in my opinion, should always be: is this dog ready for learning? And if so, what type of learning is appropriate? Yeah? What type of learning is appropriate? And sometimes, in a lot of cases, I should say, what is appropriate is allowing the dog the time and the space to process, take it all in. That's learning right there.
yeah.
Uh,
I
learning.
think you're right. I mean, I always remember talking about Dominique, who was one of the overseas rescues. My first two visits didn't even get hands on with her. Didn't even, she just was not in any way, shape, or form ready for anything. She was, so it was like, I think the third visit we managed to meet on a park outside, and she finally sniffed my foot, and it was like we didn't do any training until the fourth visit. Now that was, again, I know I'm talking about an extreme case there, but I could have easily have tried to push on, and we would have made the situation worse. So you're absolutely spot on, Colin. It's like, we have to allow the dog to show us and give us that piece of information that says, look, I'm ready for a little bit. And then you try a little bit and you see, to where you can get to, and then you break off and you do a little bit and you break off and you see if the dog comes back and wants more. And if the
Yeah,
dog starts coming back and wants more, it's like, right, now we can
yeah,
push on. And you kind of like, yeah, the dog's engaging, the dog's doing this, and the dog gives you that information, and I think it's so important that, I always kind of say, think about how you would like to be taught something yourself. If you ended up falling onto an alien planet, and how would you want to be kind of, helped or shown, and just even think about yourself through, whatever job you go into or whatever jobs you've had. It's like, how would you want to be shown so that you can have those skills to be good at that job? And most of us would want to be shown, demonstrated, taken time with. And if we have any questions, or we're getting a bit nervous or anxious about that, we're not sure about that we can feel safe to go, I'm kind of, I'm lost, or I'm stuck, or I'm doing this. We want that as humans. And I can never sometimes understand why we kind of negate that just because we don't speak their language, or we can't communicate on that level, and we have to really spot little nuances. So yeah, I'm with you.
And that's the difference between someone who has a full bot kit here, and knows how to utilize the tools within their brain, versus someone who has no skill set, no sensible, appropriate tools. And when I mean tools, I'm talking about how to work with the dog, the most
Yeah.
sensible approach. And until that sort of like gets sorted, we're going to always be back where people are not doing the right thing. But just as well, we have trainers, behaviorists like you on the planet, Jon. It will
Thank
be
you.
fine. Yeah. Thank you for coming along today. If anyone would like to get hold of you to utilize your services, how would they be able to reach you?
So obviously they can reach me. We have obviously Facebook, we have various social media channels, but we have a website, obviously, which is www.canineassist, spelt CANINE, ASSIST.co.uk. And there is, if anyone wants to reach out, there is, as soon as you go on that page, there's a little button. You can click on a phone symbol and it'll give you a booking for a call and have a chat with us. So obviously, I say join us on Facebook, Canine Assist. Look for the 3 dog sort of logo, and yeah, or our standard phone numbers, but they're all out on the website as well, so you can go from there.
Anyone watching, I would definitely, if you're looking for someone who is knowledgeable, very experienced in their field, do get in touch with Jon. Jon, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, and
I
I
know,
look
where did the
forward to
time go? Where did the
it.
time?
It does go very, very quickly, and I'm looking to
Thank you
get
for
you back
inviting me
at
though,
some
Colin.
point. You're more
Oh,
than welcome.
absolutely. Love to.
So, from me, it's a goodbye until the next time. See you all
And
soon.
take care, everyone. Enjoy your dogs.